This woman went to the absolute extreme just to cheat on her husband. In 2016, California woman Sherry Papini suddenly vanished after going out for a jog. Just as her husband and 2 little kids were losing hope, 3 weeks later, Sherry was miraculously found alive by the side of a highway. She was tied up with a bag over her head, had a broken nose, was badly emaciated, and covered in bruises. Sherry claimed that 2 Hispanic women had abducted and tortured her, but she was never able to see their faces. The local community quickly rallied behind her, even offering donations to aid in her recovery. But behind the scenes, law enforcement was skeptical of Sherry's claims. They eventually found DNA on her clothing that matched her ex-boyfriend James Reyes, who had no choice but to admit that the story was a complete hoax. Papini had faked a kidnapping, severely beat herself up, and lied to federal agents, all just to spend time with her ex-boyfriend without her family finding out. Her husband divorced her the day she was arrested, while she was sentenced to 18 months in prison in order to pay $300K to the state. Almost immediately after being liberated from concentration camps, an estimated 14,500 Holocaust survivors died from refeeding syndrome, since their bodies couldn't process normal food after such prolonged starvation. During the back surgery of a Hawaiian man in 2006, the surgeon couldn't find the 2 titanium rods that were supposed to be implanted into the man's spine, so he decided to improvise by implanting the shaft of a screwdriver instead. The screwdriver eventually snapped, and the man died 2 years later following 3 more corrective back surgeries. The patient's family was eventually awarded $5.6 million in a malpractice lawsuit. When the 2-year-old daughter of Chelsea Camp was being mauled by a vicious pit bull, the Texas mother had to act fast. She jumped on the dog's back and bit off its ear before shoving her fist down its throat to save her little girl. Both suffered serious wounds from the dog, which belonged to Chelsea's boyfriend and was normally very friendly, but suddenly turned on the toddler. The pit bull was still attacking when police arrived and had to be euthanized. In 2007, a Rhode Island hospital was fined $50,000 and reprimanded by the State Department of Health after brain surgeries were performed on the wrong side of the patient's head 3 separate times in the same year. During the mating process, dogs and other canines get stuck together for anywhere from 5 minutes to an hour. It's a natural physical mechanism called a copulatory tie where both of their genitalia interlock to ensure fertilization. The first time dogs mate, they're often surprised by this and show signs of distress while trying to pull away or run. A man from Vietnam had endured severe headaches for 5 months before finally going to the hospital. After a CT scan, the man and his doctors were shocked to find that a pair of chopsticks were lodged in his skull. It turned out that the man had been involved in a drunken fight 5 months prior that he barely remembered, and somehow ended up with chopsticks deep up his nose as a result. In 2016, a man who'd been continuously stalking Miranda Cosgrove apparently plotted to murder her. For 3 days, the stalker had been burying various weapons in Cosgrove's backyard, including knives and a rope. One day, he spent hours pacing around the area and eventually shot at a woman who looked like Miranda. The man then performed self-immolation before turning the gun on himself right in Cosgrove's yard. Miranda has stated that she still lives in the same home but refuses to stay there alone ever since that traumatic incident. In 2016, Star Trek actor Anton Yelkin died in a freak accident at the young age of 27. After pulling into his driveway in his Jeep Grand Cherokee, Yelkin went to check his locked gate for mail when the car suddenly rolled back down the driveway and pinned him against a pillar connected to the gate. It's unknown how long it took for the actor to pass, but he was found dead by friends hours after he failed to arrive at rehearsal, and the official cause of death was blunt traumatic asphyxia. Yelkin's particular car model had a known design flaw that confused drivers about whether it was properly in park, and was later recalled due to faulty gear shifters. If you think you have high cholesterol, this guy will make you feel a lot better, or should I say, a lot butter. A Florida man in his 40s followed an extreme carnivore diet for 8 months, consuming nothing but beef, butter, and cheese. He often ate entire sticks of butter and several pounds of cheese each day, causing his total cholesterol to skyrocket to over 1,000 milligrams per deciliter, while anything over 200 is considered high. As a result, he developed painless yellow cholesterol nodules on his palms, elbows, and the soles of his feet. Despite this, the patient said he felt great following the diet, and was able to lose weight while significantly improving his energy levels and mental clarity. Despite having no prior acting experience, 12-year-old Kevin Clark was cast as drummer Freddie Jones in the cult classic School of Rock. Sadly, he died in 2021 at the age of 32 after being fatally struck by a car while riding his bike in Chicago. In 1978, 134 Chinese sailors were killed because a Navy lieutenant broke up with his girlfriend. After being dumped, she took her own life, leading to the man being discharged from duty pending the investigation. So while raging on his last voyage home, he decided to detonate the charges on the ship, causing it to sink while killing 134 sailors on board. Scientists have conducted studies where they transferred gut bacteria from schizophrenic humans to mice, resulting in the mice exhibiting schizophrenic behaviors. This suggests a potential link between gut health and the development of mental disorders. In 1997, 50-year-old Massachusetts woman Judy Smith was in Philadelphia with her husband when she told him she was going out sightseeing in the city, but she never returned. Months later, her body was found in a forest 600 miles away in North Carolina, wearing different clothes and a new backpack. She had been mysteriously stabbed to death, and her killer remains unidentified to this day. In 1915, a strange illness called encephalitis lethargica broke out across the globe. Nicknamed the sleeping sickness, the disease attacked the patient's brains, leaving them frozen in a statue-like state, fully conscious but unable to move or speak. One of the most haunting aspects of this disease was its unpredictability. Some patients recovered quickly, never experiencing any long-term effects, while others went into a deep coma and never woke up. Then there were patients who seemed completely recovered, until years later when the illness came back and suddenly turned them catatonic. At least 500,000 people died from the terrifying disease before it vanished without explanation 10 years later, just as suddenly as it appeared. While many theories have been put forth over the last century, epidemiologists still remain haunted by the mysterious sickness and its unknown origins. Some say it never left, but still lingers in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again. In 1963, Frank Sinatra's 19-year-old son Frank Jr. was kidnapped from his hotel room in Lake Tahoe and held for ransom. He was released 2 days later when his father agreed to pay the $240,000, and the three perpetrators were captured and arrested soon afterwards. But the kidnapping had a lasting traumatic impact on Frank Sr., who began carrying dimes in his pockets everywhere he went, since the kidnappers demanded all communication be done through payphones, and Frank was concerned that one day he wouldn't have enough change to call them. It became such a habit that the legendary singer was even buried with 10 dimes in his pocket after he died. In January of 1993, Texas attorney David Glenn Lewis planned on watching the Super Bowl alone at home while his wife and daughter were out shopping, but when they returned, there was no sign of him. They found freshly made sandwiches in the fridge, David's laundry in the washing machine, and David's watch and wedding ring on the counter, but no David in sight. The next night, a man was killed in a hit-and-run 1,600 miles away near Yakima, Washington, and 11 years later, the body would be identified as David Glenn Lewis. How David ended up 1,600 miles away so quickly and the circumstances surrounding his death remain total mysteries to this day. During a camping trip in June of 1969, 6-year-old Dennis Lloyd Martin was last seen hiding behind a bush, planning to jump out and scare his father before he completely vanished. Despite the largest search in Great Smoky Mountains National Park history, no trace of him was ever found. While serial killer Edmund Kemper was serving time in prison, he participated in the Blind Project, a volunteer program where he recorded audiobooks for the visually impaired. Kemper spent over 5,000 hours in the recording booth, as his deep voice was apparently well suited for narration. In 1978, Amos Atkinson held an entire restaurant of 30 people hostage while armed with a shotgun, demanding that his criminal friend be released from prison. But the situation took an unexpected turn when the man's mother stormed the building in her pajamas and hit Atkinson over the head with her handbag while telling him to stop being so stupid. Atkinson then surrendered peacefully. In 2021, YouTube prankster Timothy Wilkes had approached a group of strangers in a Nashville parking lot while carrying a butcher knife. He was apparently staging a fake robbery to see how people would react, but was almost immediately shot and killed by David Starnes Jr., who said he was unaware that he was being pranked and fired in self-defense. No one was charged. In 2012, Montana man Randy Lee Tenley was trying to spark reported sightings of Bigfoot by dressing up in a ghillie suit and standing in the middle of a highway. He tragically ended up being struck by 2 different cars and was pronounced dead at the scene. In 1996, the captain and flight engineer of a Colombian cargo flight decided to prank their novice first officer by giving him control of the plane after shutting off 2 engines. The plane stalled immediately after takeoff and crashed into a neighborhood, killing 22 people, including several children who were playing soccer on the ground. When Greg Gingrich took his daughter to the Grand Canyon in 1992, he thought it would be hilarious to pretend that he was falling. So he climbed over the barrier and windmilled his arms before losing his footing, causing him to actually plummet 400 feet to his death while his young daughter watched in horror. In 2012, an Indian nurse who was the caretaker for the Duchess of Cambridge was prank called by an Australian radio station pretending to be the Queen. This led to her revealing confidential information that ended up being broadcast on the radio. 3 days later, the nurse took her own life. Known for his sense of humor, Italian pro soccer player Luciano Riccone took one joke just a little too far in 1977. He decided to fake a robbery at his friend's jewelry shop in Rome, unaware of the fact that the shop was actually robbed just 2 weeks prior and the owner was still paranoid. Luciano ran into the store yelling, "Stop, this is a robbery," while covering his face. Unfortunately, his friend acted quickly and shot Riccone directly in the chest with a shotgun. And the man's final words were, "It's just a joke." In 2000, 4-year-old Kian Hongyan survived being hit by a speeding truck driver but had to have both of her legs amputated. Sadly, due to her family's financial struggles, she couldn't be provided with prosthetics and instead had to improvise with half of a basketball. She became known as China's basketball girl, a symbol of resilience despite overwhelming odds. A few years later, her story went viral and she was offered free prosthetics by a hospital in Beijing when she turned 11. A pair of identical twins from Brazil would use their resemblance to impersonate each other and date as many women as possible, and then defend themselves from allegations that they were cheating on their girlfriends. They would even take turns having intercourse with the same women by routinely swapping with each other without the women knowing. After one of them got a woman pregnant and a DNA test was inconclusive when both twins refused to say who was the father, a judge ordered both of the twins to pay maintenance to the little girl. The judge said they were taking away from the girl's right to know who her real father was. 20-year-old Ukrainian OF model Maria Kovalchuk had been missing for 10 days until she was recently found severely injured and dumped on the side of the road in Dubai. She disappeared after telling her friends she was invited to a Dubai hotel party by two men who said they were representatives of the modeling business, and her loved ones became worried when she didn't return home on her scheduled flight 2 days later. Maria was initially thought to be dead when she was found laying on the side of the road with severe injuries including a broken spine and multiple broken limbs. She was rushed to the hospital and immediately required 4 surgeries to save her life. A police investigation revealed that she reportedly sustained the injuries after entering a restricted construction site by herself and falling from a height. However, Maria's family have disputed this account, believing that the construction site story is a cover-up for something darker. According to reports, the model currently can't speak but is expected to eventually recover. Some historians credit Cleopatra with inventing the first ever vibrator. She's said to have had a small box or hollowed out gourd filled with angry bees that she would shake and press against her lady parts for her own pleasure. Famous author and poet James Joyce wrote some rather questionable letters to his wife about how much he loved her farts. One excerpt read, "You had an arse full of farts that night, darling, and I effed them out of you. Big fat fellows, long windy ones, quick little merry cracks, and a lot of tiny little naughty farties ending in a long gush from your hole." Sir Isaac Newton was probably on the autism spectrum and perhaps asexual as well. He was apparently so invested in his work that there's no record of him ever dating someone, meaning he most likely died a virgin at the age of 84. The ancient Romans used a plant called silphium as an effective natural contraceptive. Its seeds were shaped like a heart, which is believed to have inspired the traditional heart shape we recognize today as a symbol of love. However, the Romans apparently banged so much that the plant went extinct. Jeanette McCurdy has described the relationship she had with her mother Deborah as both emotionally and abusive. When Jeanette was 3 years old, her mom was diagnosed with breast cancer and underwent multiple surgeries. As a result, Deborah would perform routine vaginal and breast exams on Jeanette and never allowed her to shower alone until she turned 17. McCurdy says that her mother was obsessed with making her a star and introduced her to a calorie restriction by age 11, leading to various eating disorders that Jeanette still struggles with, including anorexia and bulimia. McCurdy says that she refused to appear in the revival series of iCarly, only because she didn't want to be reminded of her mother's abuse during the original show. In 2022, Jeanette released a book entitled "I'm Glad My Mom Died 9 years after she passed away from breast cancer." After being a massive Nickelodeon star in the 90s and early 2000s since the age of 10, Amanda Bynes faced a public downfall after retiring from acting in 2009. She began raising eyebrows when she received a DUI upon crashing into a police cruiser in 2012. After being released, she was arrested several more times for DUIs, holding up traffic, and hit and runs until her license was finally suspended. In May of 2013, officers arrested Bynes once again for reckless endangerment, amid reports that she threw a bong out the window of her New York City apartment. A few months later, she was sent to a psychiatric hospital after starting a fire at the end of someone's driveway in California. Soon afterwards, Bynes announced that she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and conservatorship was granted to her parents. The 38-year-old now goes by the name Midge Gardiner and is completely unrecognizable. For decades, people have theorized that the kids show Caillou is about a young boy who died from cancer. This is why Caillou has a bald head, a very small frame, and is always whining as if he's in pain. He constantly acts like a brat right in front of his parents and always seems to get away with it because they're sympathetic to his illness. Every episode also starts out with Granny telling Rosie a story about her brother Caillou, because according to the theory, he passed away before Rosie was old enough to develop lasting memories of him. So the entire show is centered around Grandma filling Rosie in on her deceased brother.